Today, you've chosen to speak out for the first time. Why have you decided?
Winter descended upon the Swiss Alps with its customary silence, transforming the village of Verbier into a postcard of pristine isolation. Among the chalets owned by billionaires and industrial magnates stood a property long synonymous with scandal: the holiday villa of Prince Andrew, Duke of York. For years, this £13 million refuge had offered the Duke an escape from relentless tabloid scrutiny and whispered palace gossip. But in February 2023, a routine property inspection would uncover secrets that reached far beyond the snow-covered peaks. The discovery came not from investigators or journalists, but from Marie-Claire Dubois, a local property manager tasked with overseeing maintenance during the Duke's prolonged absence. The villa had stood empty for 18 months, unusual even by the standards of the ultra-wealthy. Following a disastrous interview and a subsequent settlement with Virginia Giuffre, Prince Andrew had withdrawn from public life, leaving the Alpine sanctuary silent, gathering dust and questions alike. On that February morning, Dubois entered through the service entrance, her breath forming clouds in the unheated interior. The six-story villa sprawled with opulence: Persian rugs on marble floors, Venetian glass chandeliers hanging dormant in the dining room, and walls lined with paintings that made her pause. Yet it was not these displays of wealth that drew her attention, but a locked door on the third floor, hidden in a corridor she had never been asked to clean. Property managers develop instincts about secret spaces, and this door, unremarkable but secured with an unusually sophisticated lock, defied all official blueprints. Contacting the Duke's legal representatives in London, she was told to leave it alone, the contents described as mere family heirlooms and private correspondence, a warning that, to Dubois, carried a weight far beyond polite caution. Accounts differ on what happened next. Some suggest she alerted Swiss authorities out of concern for insurance liabilities. Others hint at financial incentive. Within 72 hours, police, lawyers, and a locksmith arrived to open the door, revealing a previously unknown, windowless, climate-controlled room preserving documents with a scent of leather and paper. Inside were 7 filing cabinets containing decades of meticulously organized materials: financial records tracing offshore transactions, correspondence with individuals tied to international arms deals and questionable business practices, photographs both innocent and compromising, and, most explosively, evidence detailing the Duke's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein far beyond the public record, including flight logs, intermediary payments, and communications suggesting mutual benefit. These materials painted a narrative far darker and more complex than the Duke had publicly acknowledged. Yet the Epstein files represented only a portion of the trove. The cabinets also contained evidence of decades of business dealings and networks cultivated as Britain's special. The discovery revealed that Prince Andrew's role as a representative for trade and investment had entangled him with dictators and oligarchs, with records of payments and favors exchanged blurring the line between royal duty and personal enrichment. The documents painted a portrait of a parallel life, lived in the shadows of diplomatic privilege, where a prince could broker deals that would land ordinary citizens in prison. Swiss authorities, acutely aware of the diplomatic sensitivity, proceeded with care. Photographs were taken, documents catalogued, and then, in a decision that would later face intense scrutiny, the British Embassy was notified. What followed remains partly obscured by diplomatic protocols, but the contours are clear. The royal family faced a crisis that threatened not just one member, but the institution itself. News of the discovery reached Buckingham Palace through encrypted channels, first to the private secretary and then, carefully phrased, to King Charles. Barely 6 months into his reign after Queen Elizabeth II's death, Charles confronted a dilemma his mother had quietly managed for decades. Prince Andrew had long been a source of anxiety for palace officials, but this situation was unprecedented. Meticulously preserved evidence of activities that could not be dismissed as mere lapses in judgment. A meeting convened in a private office with the king, his private secretary, the master of the household, legal counsel experienced in constitutional crises, and Sir Edward Llewellyn, a former diplomat advising via secure video link. Charles listened as the scope of the situation was outlined. Andrew had not only engaged in questionable behavior but had documented it, essentially creating an insurance policy against the day the family might sever ties. The betrayal was personal, cutting deeper than tabloid scandals, suggesting a man who trusted no one, not even his own family. Legal advisors warned that public disclosure could trigger catastrophic damage. Criminal investigations in multiple jurisdictions, potential prosecution, and the exposure of decades of royal tolerance for behavior that should have prompted earlier intervention. Options were grim. Claiming diplomatic immunity risked outrage in a constitutional crisis. Full cooperation would subject the monarchy to prolonged scrutiny, or containment through negotiation could protect sensitive information but leave public perception precarious. King Charles opted for a middle path: no cover-up, but careful protection of genuinely sensitive material, while cooperating with legitimate inquiries. Crucially, he decreed that Andrew's time as a working royal was over, with no rehabilitation or return to public duties. Privately, however, the royal family fractured. Prince William argued for full transparency to confront the truth, while Princess Anne advocated stripping Andrew of titles and protections entirely, leaving him to face justice. Queen Consort Camilla observed these discussions with neutral pragmatism, recognizing that the monarchy's survival depended not on shielding its members, but on demonstrating that no one stood above the law or public accountability. Yet Camilla also recognized the human dimension. This was her husband's brother, a relationship shaped by childhood memories and family bonds that scandal could not erase. Prince Andrew remained at Royal Lodge, the 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park that he had fought to retain. When informed of the discovery, his reaction oscillated between defiance and panic, insisting the documents were being misinterpreted and context ignored, though no one was convinced. The files were too detailed and meticulously maintained to be dismissed as innocent record-keeping. They represented a man fully aware of his actions and prepared for the day they would come to light. Private conversations between Charles and Andrew remain undisclosed, but observers described a relationship shattered beyond repair. Charles, who had long defended his brother while absorbing criticism from advisors, now confronted evidence of duplicity preserved in a Swiss villa, a monument to misplaced loyalty. The palace's public statement, when it emerged, carefully acknowledged a routine property inspection, confirmed Andrew's cooperation with authorities, and emphasized a commitment to transparency while respecting ongoing legal processes. Behind this controlled language, sleepless nights, furious arguments, and frantic efforts unfolded. Forensic accountants traced financial transactions, intelligence services assessed national security implications, and lawyers negotiated with Swiss authorities to control the flow of sensitive information. As spring arrived in London, carefully managed leaks and court filings revealed the villa's contents, painting a portrait of Andrew far removed from the buffoonish public image he had cultivated. Financial documents exposed a complex network of offshore accounts, trusts in jurisdictions like the British Virgin Islands and Panama, and transactions totaling approximately £12 million between 1995 and 2018, some connected to his tenure as a trade envoy from 2001 to 2011. Files suggested he had leveraged his royal position for personal enrichment, including dealings with Timur Kulubov, a Kazakh oligarch and son-in-law of the former dictator, where Andrew facilitated business deals and benefited financially, including the sale of his former marital home above asking price through carefully channeled funds. The documents also detailed his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, revealing flights, visits to properties where abuse occurred, and communications indicating deeper involvement than publicly acknowledged, accompanied by dozens of previously unseen photographs placing him comfortably within Epstein's sphere. Interspersed among financial records and photographs were handwritten and typed notes providing a running commentary on his life, revealing a man consumed by grievance, convinced of underappreciation and familial jealousy, yet acutely aware that his actions might one day face scrutiny. These files collectively revealed not only the scope of his activities but also the calculated mindset behind them, offering a window into a life lived in the shadows of privilege, secrecy, and self-preservation. The files were not preserved out of nostalgia, but as leverage, insurance against the day the family might move against him. In a particularly chilling note from 2019, shortly after the Epstein scandal erupted, Andrew wrote that he had ensured his own protection, warning that if the palace attempted to sacrifice him, they would find he was not without resources. The revelation reframed the crisis. The royal family faced not merely a relative who had made mistakes, but someone who had weaponized information against them, maintaining a form of blackmail over decades. Intelligence services raised further concerns, noting that some of Andrew's contacts had ties to foreign intelligence and that he may have been cultivated for potential exploitation, creating risks that went beyond personal scandal into national security. Public opinion hardened as details emerged. Andrew had not merely erred in judgment, but had spent decades operating in ethical shadows, using his status to enrich himself and shield behaviors that would have ruined an ordinary citizen. Within Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, the family reckoning unfolded in whispered arguments and tense exchanges, where anger, fear, and duty collided. King Charles, caught between blood and crown, remembered his brother as a mischievous boy and promising naval officer, yet now faced overwhelming evidence of betrayal. His private conversations with William grew strained, as the prince insisted that the monarchy's survival required proving that no royal stood above consequence. Princess Anne, hardened by decades of service, saw the revelations as confirmation that Andrew believed himself untouchable, while Camilla urged measured but decisive action to prevent public outrage from consuming the family. Prince Edward and Sophie watched in quiet dread, knowing the scandal threatened lives built on diligence, while Harry in California observed with conflicted emotions, seeing the misplaced loyalties he had long criticized affirmed before the world. Andrew's daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, faced a cruel choice: defend a father whose actions were indefensible or distance themselves and risk accusations of betrayal. Tempers flared within the palace, as Charles, pushed to the edge by William's calls for full transparency, clashed with his son over mercy versus survival. Outside, pressure mounted. Parliamentary committees demanded inquiries, protesters gathered, and journalists questioned the system that had allowed Andrew's offshore dealings and private enrichment to go unchecked. The scandal had become structural, revealing an ecosystem of privilege where oversight was optional and consequences negotiable. Public patience waned, polls showed declining support among younger Britons, and even loyal newspapers called for modernization. Within the palace, courtiers whispered of audits, reduced expenses, and a permanent downsizing of working royals. Charles realized the crisis had forced an irreversible shift. The old mystique of silence and distance no longer protected the monarchy. If it were to survive, the institution would have to abandon the illusion of infallibility. Concealment itself had become the scandal. William emerged as the advocate for reform, insisting that the future of the monarchy depended on transparency, accountability, and a willingness to confront decades of sheltered privilege. Crown depended on authenticity, not perfection, and Princess Anne backed William's call for accountability, pragmatic as ever. Camilla, sympathetic to her husband's hesitation, privately conceded that William was right. King Charles, weary from the weight of both throne and conscience, gradually accepted what he had resisted. Protecting Andrew endangered everything else. Official statements followed, carefully worded acknowledgments of wrongdoing without explicit condemnation, but the message was unmistakable. The era of automatic forgiveness had ended. Andrew was to live quietly, indefinitely, stripped of title and public role. Within the palace walls, something fundamental shifted. The monarchy, once the embodiment of continuity, was forced to change or risk irrelevance. The Villophiles had not only destroyed a prince but exposed a long-whispered truth. The greatest threat to the crown had never been its enemies, but the failings of those within ITBY summer. The immediate crisis had hardened into a slow, punishing process of legal proceedings, negotiations, and incremental disclosures that refused to fade from the headlines. Prince Andrew was formally stripped of all remaining patronages and military appointments. His office at Buckingham Palace shuttered, staff dismissed, and official stationery destroyed. The title of Duke of York remained technically, but only as a courtesy. The villa itself became the epicenter of an international legal storm. Swiss authorities, coordinating with British financial investigators, pored over thousands of documents revealing a maze of offshore transfers, shell companies, and discreet intermediaries. Accounts were frozen, holders summoned, and forensic accountants traced money flows linking acquaintances, former aides, and business associates long operating in the gray zone of royal privilege. The old equilibrium, where discretion shielded misjudgments, had shattered, and his first major address to Parliament as sovereign, Charles spoke of renewal through transparency, a clear reference to his disgraced brother. He announced independent audits of royal finances, stricter rules on outside business interests, and clearer separations of personal wealth from public duty. Public scrutiny intensified. Parliamentary committees demanded line-by-line accounting of royal spending. Journalists and commentators debated whether taxpayers should continue financing an institution so often blurring service and self-interest. Newspapers published exposés. Television panels debated abolition. The monarchy, though not in immediate danger, was undeniably changed. Meanwhile, Andrew withdrew into near seclusion. Royal Lodge, once a symbol of privilege, became a gilded confinement. He ventured out rarely, for solitary rides or discreet church visits, each outing risking a photograph that tabloids would use as proof of humiliation. Old friends quietly disengaged. His daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, remained dutiful but distant, striving to maintain family ties while carving lives far removed from their father's shadow. Love endured, but it was weighed down by disappointment and the constant fear that proximity might again exact a cost. Legal processes crawled forward with glacial precision. Prosecutors in Switzerland, Britain, and the United States examined whether financial records supported criminal charges. Andrew retained a team of seasoned white-collar defense lawyers, yet even the most skilled counsel could not erase the document's implications. A pattern of influence, entitlement, and questionable associations that no court ruling could fully absolve. Diplomatic ripples followed. Republican movements in Australia, Canada, and the Caribbean seized the scandal as evidence of monarchy's obsolescence. Allied governments quietly questioned past dealings and blurred lines between public duty and private gain. In Washington, the FBI reopened parts of the Epstein investigation based on fresh villa material, forcing careful diplomatic negotiations to prevent friction. Months turned into a year. Public outrage cooled into a colder, quieter acceptance. Andrew's reputation was irretrievably damaged. He had become, in the words of one commentator, a ghost of privilege, wandering through the ruins of his own making. The royal family endured, but its moral authority was chipped. Within the palace, courtiers spoke of lessons learned while privately fearing what other secrets might still lie hidden. Charles reflected on the crisis in solitude, recognizing that the family's instinct to protect its own had enabled misconduct. The revelation was not only about Andrew's guilt but about the monarchy's collective blindness. The monarchy, as ever, would endure. It had survived abdication, war, divorce, and death. But this time endurance required transformation. The new reign would be defined less by mystique than accountability. The gilded certainties of an earlier era were gone, replaced by the austere knowledge that public trust, once lost, could only be rebuilt slowly and painfully. The villa in Verbier, once a retreat of opulence and secrecy, had become a monument to the perils of unchecked privilege. In its shuttered windows and emptied rooms lay a lesson. No title, however ancient, could shield its bearer from consequence forever. What began as one man's disgrace ended as a mirror held up to an entire institution, forcing a reckoning with privilege, accountability, and the lengths to which a royal would go to protect himself, even from his own family.